As the jury deliberations continue in the case of Paul Manafort, we are learning new information about Andrew Mueller, a close associate of Trump's former advisor Roger Stone, who dodged the Mueller grand jury last week. Mueller was an assistant to Stone in 2016. His lawyers say that Mueller wants to pump him for information about Stone and Russian hacking, among other things. But Mueller refused to appear before the grand jury and is now being held in contempt. His attorney, Paul Kamenar, joins me in just moments. He says Mueller's actions are all part of a strategy to challenge the authority and the validity of the Russian special counsel. But first, Trace Gallagher is live in our West Coast newsroom with the backstory. Trace.
Hey, Melissa, Andrew Mueller was in charge of Roger Stone's schedule back in 2016, and that subpoena you mentioned for Mueller to appear in front of a grand jury was specifically aimed at gathering information on WikiLeaks and its founder, Julian Assange, as well as the infamous hacking group Guccifer 2.0. Mueller's refusal to appear and the contempt charge leveled against him certainly made waves at the time, but Mueller's legal defense team says it's all part of a larger plan to prove that Robert Mueller's investigation is illegitimate, and here's why. Mueller's attorneys argue that only Attorney General Jeff Sessions has the power to appoint special counsel. Mueller was appointed by Deputy AG Rod Rosenstein. Mueller also didn't go through a Senate confirmation process, and they argue that's a violation of the Constitution's Appointments Clause. Therefore, any subpoenas Mueller issues are invalid. But in order to appeal Mueller's case, they needed the contempt charge to go forward, and they maintain this could have big implications. Watch.
This case is likely to end up in the United States Supreme Court. So this is a major precedent-setting case. It raises serious constitutional issues on the Appointments Clause, whether Mr. Mueller was properly appointed.
Andrew Mueller also has some deep pockets in his corner. The conservative nonprofit National Legal and Policy Center, or NLPC, is bankrolling his entire case, saying in a statement, quoting here, "We needed one client for this project, and we have him. We're committed to paying all the costs associated with this constitutional challenge." Paul Kamenar is also taking a reduced fee for his work. But even if Mueller's appeal fails, Roger Stone says there's nothing for him to tell, saying in a statement, quote, "Andrew Mueller has no knowledge or evidence of Russian collusion or WikiLeaks collaboration or any other illegal activity on my part. If and when he is ever compelled to testify, I am highly confident that he would tell the truth." Roger Stone has also been quoted saying that Andrew Mueller is like a son to him. Melissa.
Interesting. Trace Gallagher, thank you so much. And here now is Paul Kamenar. He is attorney for Andrew Mueller. Sir, your client right now is not in jail at the time, even though he ignored that subpoena for the grand jury. Do you think, how far is he willing to go in all of this? Eventually, is he willing to go to jail to not testify?
Well, let me explain what happened. He was interviewed by 2 FBI agents back in May, told him everything he knew, which was nothing other than what he read in the newspapers about Guccifer, Julian Assange, WikiLeaks. They asked him to turn over documents. He turned over all the documents he had. And then they said to testify before the grand jury on June 29th. We filed a motion to quash that. The court heard the argument, denied our motion, and ordered him to appear last Friday. The day before, we asked the court, he's not coming tomorrow, please hold him in contempt. And we wanted him to do so in order for us to appeal. The judge obliged, held him in contempt, but stayed her decision, saying, as long as you're appealing this case, we will not put him in jail or hold him in contempt anymore. So on Monday, we filed our notice of appeal, and this case is now being on an expedited briefing schedule, and we will have a brief next month and an argument probably sometime in October. So
it could go on and on and on, and you think all the way to the Supreme Court?
Well, yes, because regardless of who wins in the Court of Appeals, the losing party will go to the Supreme Court. But I would like to say what our argument is.
Okay.
And just to clarify, we have 2 arguments. One's a statutory argument, and the other one's a constitutional. Statutory, we say there's really no statute that clearly allows for the appointment of the special counsel. The government cites some FBI statute for appointing FBI officials. We say that doesn't apply. They cite some other statute from 1870 we think is not specific enough. And then our constitutional argument is this. If he is allowed to be appointed under the Constitution, they're either principal officers, which, like U.S. attorneys, have to go through confirmation process. Robert Mueller is more important than your average U.S. attorney. He can file indictments in Virginia, D.C. He can indict Russian foreign agents.
Right.
He's a super U.S. attorney. He's a U.S. attorney at large. The government says, well, he's really just an inferior officer. And we said, okay, if he's an inferior officer, the Constitution says he has to be appointed by the head of the department, which is Jeff Sessions. Jeff Sessions didn't appoint him. So we say that Robert Mueller flunks both tests under the Appointments Clause.
If it gets all the way to the Supreme Court and they say he has to testify, if you lose this, will he do it at that point?
Sure. If the grand jury and Mueller's still investigating this, it sounds like they're trying to wrap. They sound like they're trying to wrap it up. But who knows? Sure, of course. If we lose our case, he will comply and go to the grand jury and tell him what he knows, which is basically nothing anyway. Then he already turned over and talked to the FBI agents.
Well, that's my next question: is why is it that they want to bring him out there if he already talked to 2 FBI agents, if he already turned over documents, if he's already said everything that he needs to? What was it of interest that he may have that they want to have before their grand jury?
Who knows? I mean, the government, the special prosecutor is relentless in all their prosecution, and they just want to, I guess, make sure they cover all their bases. But we think that this is, unfair. He's been cooperative. He hasn't been recalcitrant. But nevertheless, this is a principle that he strongly believes in. Andrew Mueller is a libertarian. He believes in less government and less governmental power, and this is where he agreed to have this case brought before the Supreme Court, and the National Legal Policy Center is more than willing to bring this case up.
All right. Well, we'll keep an eye on it. Paul Kamenar, thank you for your time tonight.
You bet.